Joe Biden delivers a fat cup check right to the nutsack. Biden slaps down 2 demands from left wing of his party, saying he won't write off $50,000 in student debts, and says he would compromise on timing a $15 an hour minimum wage. Former Vice President Joe Biden said Tuesday that he wouldn't write off $50,000 in student loan debt per American, as progressives have asked. At a town hall in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the former vice president also said that he was open to having the $15 an hour minimum wage go into effect gradually. On student loans, Biden said he wanted to cancel $10,000 per borrower, but feared the bigger sum would go to graduates who went to Ivy League schools. So there you go. There's always some component to it. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think he's been pretty consistent on the 10K number himself. Don't follow everything the guy says, but I think some individuals like Elizabeth Warren were out there talking about $50,000. I do seem to recall, though, that there was something where Biden was talking about 10K for most and a higher amount for individuals who went to historical black colleges and universities. Interesting how some individuals would get preference based on race. Biden participated in a CNN town hall in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he wiggled away from the left of his party, knocking down attendee Joycelyn Fish's ask that he work to get $50,000 wiped from each American's student loan bill. The issues that are always raised are, does that really resolve the problem? I guess I would think about it in the way that they talk about illegals, right? If you go through this process every 20 or 30 years where you just give everybody a path to citizenship, but you don't fix the underlying issues with immigration regulation, then the problem is just going to keep manifesting and manifesting. So tie that to this. If you wipe off $50,000 in debt from everyone's student loan bill, what's going to stop people from coming back in another 5 years or 10 years saying, hey, they got it, what about us? Or people in the past say you had just paid off your student loan, what about you, right, is what you're thinking. How is my taxpayer money going to go to help these individuals? I want my piece of the pie. And I would say the same for the minimum wage as well. Is I've seen these signs saying $20 an hour. Well, once 15 happens, and this is not a debate for it to happen or not, I haven't developed a firm position on that. Mainly, I'd say free market. But once you get to 15 and individuals get comfortable with that lifestyle that 15 provides, then it's, okay, now I'm comfortable with this, give me more because I deserve it. So same kind of thing is, once you give somebody something, they'll get used to it, they'll thank you, they'll be happy with it for about 3 minutes. Then you see the fight for 20 signs being mass produced when it was the fight for 15 before, because once you get to 15, it can't be the fight for 16. Fight for 17, 18, 19, it doesn't have a good ring to it. The fight for 20. Biden said he stood by the plan he articulated on the campaign trail, which was to absolve adult borrowers from $10,000 worth of debt. I understand the impact of debt, and it can be debilitating, he said. But I do think that in this moment of economic pain and strain, that we should be eliminating interest on the debts that are accumulated. Number one, agreed. And number two, I'm prepared to write off a $10,000 debt, but not 50. That first one is pretty good. I've always been an advocate of that. I've talked about that in my videos in the past. Freezing payments, certainly during this time, and cutting that interest rate to zero. But look, it's like I just said a little bit earlier. People are getting used to not having to pay this thing. What happens when the moratoriums are lifted? What are these individuals going to do that have been getting used to this? And the same thing with the eviction moratoriums, not having to pay rent and things like that. Getting used to a certain lifestyle. And we're almost a year into this now. How are you going to then all of a sudden pull the rug out from individuals and expect them not to be a little disappointed there I don't think I have the authority to do it by signing, the president added. Members of his own party, including Senator Warren and Senate Majority Leader Schumer, have said Biden does have the power. Progressive activists have been pushing for the number to go up. The Biden admin needs to be pushed, said Rep. AOC during an Instagram Q&A last Tuesday. They have said they're comfortable with $10K in forgiveness, but we need at least $50K minimum, and there is support for $50K. Now, she had debt back when she first was elected. I remember her saying something about that. I don't know how much it was. I wonder if she's just paying it off little by little every month. I mean, with the amount of money she's accumulated via various means, you wonder if she's paid her debt off in full. You would hope so. But I wonder if she's just making like little payments and she owes over $50K, and that's why she's really hoping for this debt to be wiped out. Wouldn't it be funny if she owed right around $50K and that's why that's the number she's pushing for? Biden suggested he wasn't comfortable with that much debt relief because he feared it was going to students who graduated from Ivy League universities. I say to a community, I'm going to forgive the debt, the billions of dollars of debt for people who have gone to Harvard and Yale and Penn, and the schools of my children, he said. But is that going to be forgiven rather than use that money to provide for early education for young children who come from disadvantaged circumstances? There it is. Are we talking about mentally disabled individuals? That's definitely a disadvantage. I would definitely be for that, for special education programs to be expanded to help out those individuals. Hey, come on, Joe, let's get it together. Is that what he's really talking about? Those disadvantaged circumstances? What else could he be talking about? Maybe he'll tell us a little more explicitly. Biden first talked about his plans to make education more affordable, like free community college, before getting back to the plight of loan holders, who are sometimes a decade or two out of school. Biden said he backed Americans being able to pay off their debt through certain career fields and volunteer work. I wonder if we have programs in place already. Wow, what an idea. There's not a single program like that in place that exists. This guy's such an innovator, isn't he? Who would have ever thought that there'd be programs in place where if you worked a certain amount of time in a certain profession, you could get some of your debt forgiven. Wow, how does he do it? He was also supportive of repayment programs, which already exist, that are based on income. He's familiar with something that already exists. He did it again. It's almost akin to somebody requiring masks in federal properties and on airplanes. It's almost like those things already existed, and yet somebody had an idea in 2021 to act like those were things that were their ideas. I don't know. What do I know? I'm not president. And you cannot be charged more than X% of your take-home pay so that it doesn't affect your ability to buy a car, own a home, etc., Biden said. Psaki wants to circle back to that one. Biden was pressed on his plan to originally include a $15 an hour minimum wage in the 19 relief bill, which might not happen now because the Senate will likely have to use a certain parliamentary procedure for passage, and the wage hike will have to be dropped. The president was asked about it by a small business owner who fretted about paying employees that much money when the cost of living in the Midwest is lower than other parts of the country. South is not much different than the Midwest in that regard, Biden said. Really? Biden explained that the way to do it is to do it gradually over several years, but it's totally legitimate for small business owners to be concerned about that changes. He admitted those changes. He was applauded when he said, where it's $7.25 an hour, no one should work 40 hours a week and live in poverty. They want to assume that everybody's like Amazon and Walmart, Target. Look at these companies making record profits. Everyone's like that. Let's get $15 an hour across the board. But they don't take into consideration small business owners, as I said, those individuals that have been effed over big time by the shutdowns. It makes me wonder if, I know this is federally, and local jurisdictions will be different statewide, but it makes me wonder if there's some way to break it down into different categories. poorer states wouldn't be required. It'd come up with some kind of formula based on average cost of living, average poverty rates in a given state. Mix that in with the size of the business. Obviously, you can hold a Walmart or a Target or somebody like that, Best Buy, more accountable to a higher wage, tie it to their profits. Is there some kind of hybrid method that you could use where it's not just 15 across the board for somebody in Iowa versus somebody in New York City? That's a little different. Now, obviously, a lot of cities and states can come up with their own things, but just to do something at the federal level that is a hybrid, that's a mix of things that takes into consideration other factors, mainly poverty levels, wages within that state on average, business size, things like that. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing some things right here, formulating some things on the fly. So that's the article right there. Let's get a couple comments in and then cut it off. All the smack talk. He talked on Trump and he is no better. It's too soon, or him to be backtracking, I guess that should say for him to be backtracking and making broken promises. I don't see a second term for him at all. Well, first of all, if he even survives this term, that would be a shocker. As I said, Kamala with a candlestick in the study, my guess, gave him a clue. But backtracking politicians, making promises on the campaign trail that they never intend to keep? Well, to be fair, though, he didn't say 50, as far as I know, in terms of student loan debt. That was regressives and regressives in disguise, like Elizabeth Warren kind of pushing that. Watch the student debt episode of Patriot Act on Netflix. In fact, watch all of Patriot Act on Netflix to see what's really going on in the U.S. Every single statement is backed up by facts. We don't want that. Who wants facts? We're done. We're past that. We don't live in the factual world anymore. That said, I've never seen Patriot Act. I'll have to check it out. What? No free college for students that got their degree in library science? You mean students will have to get a degree for something that pays? Liar, 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 liar. Lying, cheating, hacking, weeping. Joe Obama's American. Bernie is going to be pissed. Hope he has his tan jacket and knitted mittens handy for a mope fest. Bernie's a fake and a phony. I've always said it. Said it way back when I first started doing videos over a year ago. I've always known he was a fake and a phony. Bernie will be good. Trust me. He'll put on a public face like he gives a damn, but he's got his mittens, and you know what he's got with his mittens? That cash money that he's just counting, baby, making it rain. That's all Bernie cares about. Bernie's good to go. I'm English, so I can see as clear as day something that you left-wingers in the U.S. have yet to realize about your buddy Biden. Not long ago in the UK, we had a guy called Jeremy Corbyn run for Prime Minister in the general election. He reminds me of Biden in many ways, but the most pronounced reason for that is that Corbyn made many promises to the young and gullible for their votes. He promised to clear student debts, abolish university fees, and introduce a ridiculously high minimum wage. So, all the gullible of society, of course, voted for him. In other words, yes, Biden voters, but Bernie voters back in 2016. Same thing. It wasn't until after the election, when the public had had the good sense to vote for the other guy, that he sent someone onto breakfast TV to admit he wouldn't have been able to keep his pledges. She said they'd run the numbers and realized it wasn't feasible, after all. Well, look at that. He knowingly lied to secure votes from the young and gullible. Like Biden, only somehow enough of you fell for this BS to help him win. Well said, love it. And then Naomi Waltz says, I fell for Biden's lies. That Naomi, she was up here, right? She had said something. Okay, here she goes. She said all the smack talk he talked on Trump and he's no better. And that's ignorance for young individuals. And that's not to say you should have voted for Trump or anything like that. It's just when you have a media who does nothing but lie to you and spin things in a certain way and you don't branch out. And I would say the same of individuals on the right. Don't be like that. I've said it many times. Don't get stuck in the echo chamber. They talk about Parler being back. And the problem is you don't want to have Parler turn into essentially a right-wing Twitter. You don't want to just sit there and have the same conversation with the same people over and over again. It just feeds your biases. I know it's difficult to search out things that make us uncomfortable, but that's what I would say about those young individuals. They have to seek out the information. If they're only told the news on Twitter, Facebook, kind of how the narrative's crafted by these big tech companies to get them to believe and vote a certain way. An individual has to be free thinking enough to get out of that. Now, again, they may arrive at the conclusion that Biden's the best guy for them. They may have arrived at it being Trump or a third party, some other candidate. But it's hard. It really is hard to break out of that. And I know when I was young, college-aged, a half a lifetime ago, I was that same way. I was all about Al Gore, baby. Yeah, and you can't believe how pissed I was and how much I thought that George Bush stole the election, that it was rigged and everything like that. Al Gore and the hanging chads. But it's just an evolutionary process. Those of you who are more towards the center, even center left or center right, you get it. You have to seek out the information for yourself because we're constantly being lied to. And it's unfortunate. And the biggest thing about it, though, is I would say this, and it's smart on the Democrats. It's smart of the media, Hollywood, entertainers, celebrities, all that. Athletes that if you can get to somebody when they're young, like the cigarette companies used to do, right, with advertising. If you can get to somebody when they're young, you've got a customer for life. And the way with the Democrats now control most of the institutions, including higher learning, secondary education, teaching SJW stuff, that they're getting to them while they're young. And once you get them when they're young, it's hard to show them the truth. Even if you could put the facts right there in front of their face, it's hard for people to admit they're wrong and that they've been deceived. It's an ego thing, I would say. That's all I got, everybody. Take care. Thanks for watching and be well.